All right, hello Neogenians, welcome to Dawn of the New Earth. Today we are continuing to talk about the Tree of Death, the Qlippothic, specifically Lilith and the Demon Queens, and how to work with them to unlock your power, desire, money, etc. It's going to be a very interesting topic. I know that so many of you have been asking for more videos about the Tree of Death and the Qlippothic, so we are diving into that today, and it's going to be good. It's going to be dark. It's going to be very interesting. I think you're really going to like it. This is a topic that I've been looking forward to discussing for a while. So we're going to get started right away, but you know the drill. Before we do, make sure you hit like and subscribe. And if you haven't become a member yet, please do. It helps out the channel a lot, helps me reach more people with this information, and you get access to a ton of stuff. Free for members, I'm going to create a summary downloadable PDF for everything we talk about in this video. You'll also get access to my downloads on the Tree of Death, alchemy, rituals, etc. Free for members. You can get access to our members only videos, a ton of members only videos, hundreds. And we're having one after this called Can You Really Know God, or Is It Forever Out of Reach? That's today's members only topic. And if you want to help out even more, check out my books. If you like what we talk about in terms of consciousness, I recommend this book of mine. It's called Psychogenesis, Self and Universal Transformation. And this is in terms of a new psychology for a new consciousness, how to understand self-transformation to reach the highest levels of consciousness and transform your world through applying your will through a technique we call will forming. Okay. Oh yeah, and follow me on Spotify. Links to all of those things are in the description of this video, okay? So we're going to get started right away. We are talking here about Lilith, the Demon Queens, the Tree of Death. And for those who don't know, we have the Tree of Life and the Tree of Death. If you haven't seen my videos on the Tree of Life or the Tree of Death, that's okay. You don't need to know them to be able to get a grasp on what we're talking about today. And this is some important stuff that you need to know. But in general, what we're talking about, let me kind of give you an overview of what we're even talking about today. We're talking about demons, but not the Hollywood kind, okay? What I'm talking about are actual, real spiritual forces, not in terms of entities that exist externally, but that exist within your psyche, okay? We're talking about what's known as the Qlippothic, all right? So we talked about the Tree of Death last time. The Qlippothic are the different aspects of the Tree of Death. It is the shadow side. This is the Tree of Death, which is the shadow side of the Tree of Life. So these are essentially symbolic structures of your psyche. Okay. Once again, I'm going to give a very brief overview. If you want more detail, check out my last video on it. But as a very brief overview, these represent the structure of your psyche in a symbolic form. The Tree of Life represents higher aspects, and the Tree of Death represents lower or shadow aspects. So every aspect on the Tree of Life has its shadow counterpart on the Tree of Death. And so working with the Tree of Life is about organizing yourself and your consciousness to reach higher and higher states of divinity. Working with the Tree of Death is about unlocking dark, chaotic, raw, repressed energy so that it's not sabotaging you, and so that you can use that power as energy to fully amplify your life and getting everything to work together. Okay, so basically, in a nutshell, what this means is that if you think of the Tree of Life as like angels and the Tree of Death as like demons, throughout history, we've been told that, oh, the angels are at war with demons. You need to have your angels defeat your demons, etc. That's not what you want to do, because these are all parts of you. So you literally have a civil war in your mind by trying to have the angels and demons fight each other. Instead, you want to treat them, channel it, instead of being a civil war, to a symphony where they are working together. It's just that the demons aren't necessarily evil. They just play the bass notes, the darker notes, okay? The darker tones, which are necessary for a full sounding symphony. So the first force we're going to be working with today is the force of Lilith, okay? Now, most people avoid this kind of stuff, but if you want real transformation, this is where it begins. So we're going to be talking about actually two in total. So Lilith on the Tree of Death is located right here. And then right above Lilith is a Qlippothic called Gamaliel. So we're going to be working with Lilith, Gamaliel, and the beings tied to them, which are the demon queens. Okay. Now, what you're going to notice is that there is a ton of feminine energy on the tree of death. Now, I want to make it very clear that this is not because the feminine is somehow evil. The reason why you find it on the tree of death is because the feminine throughout history has been systematically repressed. So for centuries, society has feared feminine power, sexuality, intuition, emotion, creation, rage. And what do? What has happened? They have demonized it. And so you're going to find a lot of feminine energy here, again, not because it's evil, but because it's been repressed. So it gets moved into the shadow. And so that's why the Qlippo are full. I mean, it's not that like there's only feminine energy in the Qlippo, but there's a lot. And the reason why is that in the Qlippo, it's full of demonized goddesses and dark feminine archetypes. But it's not that they're here to destroy us or that they're evil, but it's because we refuse to see them in the light throughout history. Okay? So here's what you need to understand. We're talking about the tree of death. You don't really have to worry too much about the tree of life. We're mostly focusing on the tree of death. This is just a reference here to have it so that you can see the correspondences. Okay, so each one of these spheres on the tree of life is called a sephira, and each one of the spheres on the tree of death is called a Qlippa. So sephira, Qlippa. Plural is sephirot, Qlippot. Some pronounce it, so sephira, they pronounce sphira instead of sephirot, sphirot. Then you see even a stronger correspondence. Sphira, Qlippa. Sphirot, Qlippot. So Qlippot means shells or husks. They are the energy that gets discarded and thrown into the dark. So here's what you need to understand about what a Qlippa even is. A Qlippa isn't just a demon, it's a whole damn world. So when we talk about the Qlippo, I want you to think of a Qlippa like a building, okay, like a building. And then we're going to associate different levels of the building. For example, for a Qlippot, a Qlippa, we are going to associate an Archon, an Archdemon, and a planet. And each one of these are like different floors in the building. It gives you a different perspective on how the energy of the Qlippa as a whole works. Now, you'll notice if you are new to this, I don't know if you are or not, but either way, what we are doing is beginning to have our first taste of blending Gnostic ideas with Kabbalistic ideas. We will increasingly do this to create a very powerful psychological system, okay? So Qlippa or Qlippot are Kabbalistic ideas, which are chaotic worlds. Now, Archons come from the Gnostic traditions. And in the Gnostic tradition, Archons are assigned, Archon means ruler, so Archons are assigned to rule over chaos. It's what structures it. So you have the Qlippothic energy that is chaotic, and then the Archonic energy that begins to stabilize it into some sort of form that's actually usable or coherent. Then you have the Archdemon. Now, the Archdemon is where things start becoming more personal because it is associated with archetypes and how that particular Qlippa actually interacts with your mind, your fears, your desires, your shadow, your actions, etc. Well, I shouldn't say your actions, but it's how it structures your psyche, how it structures your mind. And then we get to the planet, and the planet shows you how that energy actually plays out in your actual life, like your choices, your habits, and behavior. Okay? So, all in all, we have a Qlippa. Within the Qlippa, we have an Archon, which is the highest level organizing structure of it. We have the Archdemon, which represents the archetypal energy that is associated with organizing the psyche. And then we have the planet, which is the effect, the action, the behavior in the real world. So once again, by the way, if this sounds really complicated, don't worry, just go with it. You don't need to like know all this stuff or memorize all this stuff. It's just kind of let it wash over you. It'll start to click and fall into place as we continue, and as we go along. So the main thing to understand here is that when it comes to Qlippa and Archons and Archdemons or whatever, we are not here to fight them. We are not here to slay them. So like if you read the Gospel of Mary, the soul has to fight and conquer the various archons to ascend. But what we're doing here is different. We're not necessarily conquering them, we're integrating them. Now you could consider, if you want to consider integrating as conquering, sure. But what we're not doing is repressing them or demonizing them or telling them that they're evil or bad. What we're doing is we're integrating them. We're working with those forces in a productive and balanced way. These forces are part of you. The more you run from them, the more control they're going to have over you. But when you, or even if you try to overpower them by repressing them, they're just going to control you from behind the scenes. So you can't run from them, you can't repress them, but when you actually face them, when you integrate them, you unlock their power. And by the way, integrate is just a fancy word for meaning deal with. You find a way to deal with it. I always like to compare Qlippothic and demonic energy in general as like gasoline. Gasoline can be incredibly dangerous and burn everything down in its path. But if you harness it in the right way, then you can use it to power an engine in your car and get you from point A to point B. So the Qlippa, the demons, the archons, they are your power. Demons are raw energy. Angels give that energy structure. You need both. That's why we have angels and demons that need to be working together. But today we're focusing on the Qlippothic and the demonic aspects. Okay, so what we're going to be doing today is looking at what this is and what it means for you personally, and what happens when you don't integrate it, what kind of power you gain when you do integrate it, and how to integrate it, and what's hidden inside. So if you're really serious about shadow work, this is where the real transformation happens, all right? So we're going to get started here. Now, okay, so by the way, this isn't just theory. I am going to be giving you exercises for actually working with this and how and integrating, okay? So let's start. We're going to be talking about Lilith. So the Lilith or Lilith is right here and is the first or 10th, depending on if you're starting from the bottom and going up. But if you're starting from the bottom and going up, she's the first or the last, depending how you look at it. And she is the shadow of Malchut. Malchut is the kingdom. Malchut is the physical world. And she's the shadow of Malchut. So she's the shadow of the material world, okay? So Lilith is as a Qlippa, Lilith is the shadow of the material. Malchut represents the world, the material world, or the world of actions and behavior, okay? The material world or the world of actions and behavior. Lilith is the shadow of Malchut. It's the shadow of the physical world, actions and behavior. Now remember, Lilith or Lilith as a Qlippa isn't just like a single entity, it's an entire realm. It's like a building, like I said, okay? So Lilith, the title, that goes, so each of these have a title, just like Malchut has the kingdom, Yesod has foundation, Keter has the crown, Chokhmah has wisdom, Binah has understanding, Chesed, and Gevura and Netzach and Tiferet. They all have their various, names, whether it's kingdom, foundation, crown, etc. So Lilith's title here is the Queens of the Night. Okay, so the Qlippa is Lilith, the Queens of the Night, because inside this realm live the Queens of the Night, these repressed parts of the physical world that we've been taught are bad or unacceptable in some way. Things like sex, pleasure, money, the body, desire. So you see this all the time. The mainstream religion demonizes sex and sees it as this dirty thing, sees the body as being a product of sin. You even have, like, when it comes to money, people in spiritual communities being like, oh, money's bad. You need to just like go sell everything and live in poverty, which all of that is demonizing perfectly healthy aspects of the human or material or actionable existence. But of course, handled incorrectly, it can go very wrong. You don't want to have sex with anyone and everyone all the time. You don't want to do nothing but eat junk food all day. You don't want to treat money as an end unto itself instead of a means to an end and at the expense of others, etc. Okay, but what I'm saying is that the Lilith Qlippa, the Queens of the Night, is the shadow of the physical and the material and represent things that we've been taught to deny, like money, sex, pleasure, the body, desire. Okay, now Lilith is the very like foundation of the tree of death. She is the when we begin, we start here. She's the gateway in to the Qlippot, the first step in integration. And she represents everything we've been taught to feel shame about in physical existence, especially around desire, pleasure, sex, etc. Okay? So for those who don't know, I've done a whole video on like who Lilith is in legend, but as a quick refresher, let's do a quick refresher for those who may not remember or have never heard. In Jewish legend, specifically in a book called the Alphabet of Ben Sirach, Lilith was Adam's first wife, who was created from the same earth as him. Not from him or from a rib or anything like that. She was created from the same earth as him. Interesting side note, Adama means earth. So Adam comes from the word earth. Anyway, Adam tried to dominate Lilith, like sexually. And Lilith refused. Lilith wanted equality. So it wasn't just about sex. That was like a metaphor for in general, equality. Lilith wanted equality. Adam wanted to dominate. And you notice it wasn't like it wasn't like Adam wanted to dominate and Lilith was like, oh, I want to dominate. Adam wanted to dominate and Lilith was like, just, hey, I want equality. But he wouldn't give her equality. And when she wouldn't give it, or when he wouldn't give it, she spoke the ineffable name of God, grew wings, and flew out of the garden. And then from that moment on, she was demonized and became known as the mother of demons, the one who births what religion tries to suppress. As a Qlippa, she's the root of everything taboo related to the physical. Sexual power, bodily pleasure. In our terms here, even money. And not only that, but she also embodies feminine rage because of how much the patriarchal systems of our world have repressed the feminine including the feminine body, in seeing it as weak or lesser than or dirty. All you have to do is like look at the history, our history, to see how often the woman's form has been demonized. So the important thing to remember is that Lilith, this Qlippa, and any of the Qlippot, they are not necessarily evil. It's about the rejected parts of being human. This one related to the physical. Everything has a place, right? Like it's kind of like anger. Is anger necessarily evil? No, you can use anger as a fuel for change. But if you don't integrate it, it can ruin your life. So that's the point with understanding this, okay? So we're talking about the Lilith or Lilith Qlippa and how it relates to the shadow of the physical. So like I said, this building analogy is really helpful. You can imagine Lilith as a Qlippa as like a building, and each floor of the building represents a level of how this energy operates. From the general spiritual architecture to the psyche to everyday actions. Okay? So what we're going to do is look at some of the different levels here. For simplicity's sake, I have omitted one of the levels just because it would make this video way too long and way too complicated. But we'll perhaps talk about that in another day. But for now, this is more than enough. So so remember, this is like a building, and you can think of it as having like different levels. So at the highest level is the Archon, okay? The highest level is the Archon. Each Qlippa is assigned an Archon, and it is the highest level of the realm. And it gives the Qlippa its structure so that it doesn't just disintegrate into chaotic energy. Here, the Archon of Lilith is Aishet Tsenunim. Now, Aishet Tsenunim is considered an aspect or sister of Lilith. So Aishet Tsenunim is an aspect or sister of Lilith, and her name means woman of whoredom. And she's even called, I believe in the Zohar, a wife of harlotry and the end of all flesh. Pretty badass, if you ask me. So what Aishet represents as the highest level of this Qlippa is the generalized idea of everything repressed about the physical world, okay? It's just the generalized idea of everything repressed about the physical world. Sexuality, desire, wealth, beauty, indulgence, all the things that we've been told are evil or sinful or shameful or dark. So as an Archon, she isn't about something specific. She's the overarching field that holds the framework of this Qlippa in place. The sort of governing principle of the realm of physical repression, okay? Now, if we are to go down a level to, let's say, a middle floor or one level down, we have the archdemon or archdemon. So, like archangels, archdemons, okay? So, as the archdemon, this is specifically a more specific archetype that interacts with your psyche. Okay, this is where it starts to become personal here. In Jungian terms, it would exist in the collective unconscious, but begins to organize your psyche. The archdemon of Lilith is Neama. Now, Neama's name literally means pleasant. She is also described as another aspect of Lilith. Sometimes her younger sister, or rarely, but occasionally, her daughter. But either way, she's an extension of Lilith's energy. a step closer to it, how it takes shape in the human mind. So you see how we have the overall structure of the Qlippa of Lilith, the Archon of an aspect of Lilith, Aishet Senunim, the Archdemon Neama, the younger sister or daughter of Lilith, and Neama represents how the energy of the Qlippa organizes your psyche. She brings Aishet's generalized repression into personal patterns. She is the force that is behind what actually starts to happen in your psyche. In other words, she is the root of your thoughts, cravings, fears, and behaviors related to the repressed aspects of the physical. So, Neama is the pattern maker of the Lilith Qlippa. She's also known as the lovely temptress. She uses music, beauty, and charm in legend to lead others into idol worship. So again, according to, I believe even in the Bible, Neama is mentioned as a human, as the sister of Tubal-Cain from the line of Cain. But eventually, down the road, through Kabbalistic writings, she was transformed into something more, a demoness, who, along with Lilith, actually seduced Adam, who was having a 130-year separation from Eve. Talk about a break. Adam and Eve took a break, 130-year break. So while they were on a 130-year break, Lilith and Neama seduce Adam. And from their union, they produced demonic offspring, which in the Zohar are called the plagues of mankind. Now, these are not literal plagues. In our terms, they're psychological. But Neama didn't stop with Adam. She's also the one who seduced Azazel and the Watchers, leading to fallen angels, the fallen angels that fell from heaven into the world of flesh. You see the association with the earth, the flesh. So Neama is spiritual corruption through physical pleasure. She takes all the repression from the Lilith Qlippa and turns it into an internal blueprint. So this can lead to things like greed, the feeling that you never have enough. You have to keep collecting stuff, buying stuff, hoarding stuff just to feel happy for a second, to try and fix some kind of emptiness you have in you. It can lead to lust in a way that's a constant hunger for sex, a constant hunger for attention, not because you're enjoying it like a healthy way, but because you fear like you're unwanted, or you want to seek partners not to actually connect to people, but for validation, or just to try and quell addictive behaviors, etc. Now, remember, don't get ahead of me, because I'm not saying that things like money and sex are bad, but remember, like gasoline, right now, we're exploring what happens when you don't use it right. Another aspect is vanity, obsessing over how people view you. This can lead to spending hours editing your photos, comparing yourself to everyone, hoping that maybe if you look good enough, you'll finally feel happy. It's the part that could use like charm or sex to feel worthy. Obsession with being seen and praised and desired. So again, this can show up as a lot of different things, like needing validation through social media likes, or over-identifying with your looks, or hiding behind a certain look that you feel that you should look while your feelings are repressed. Porn addiction, self-hatred, compulsive hookups, all this stuff. But really, I'm getting a little bit of my head ahead of myself, because it's not, when we get to the planetary level, that's when the actual actions start to occur. Neama represents more how the organization of your psyche that leads to that. Okay, so like, for example, let's take compulsive hookups. For example, you're just sleeping around with everyone, and maybe like even having unprotected sex or whatever. Like it's like in a way that's dangerous and not good, right? This isn't just healthy. I'm saying in a way that could be unhealthy. So Neama isn't related to the actual action itself. Neama is related to the way that your psyche is structured or organized that leads to that behavior. Does that make sense? It's kind of like the feeling of being hungry that leads to you go getting food from the refrigerator. So in that analogy, Neama would be like the feeling of being hungry, but it's not so much, a physical feeling like hunger. It's more like a psychological thing that leads you to do something. Okay. So that's what Neama represents. And what we're going to find out here is that, let's see, let me get my notes. Okay. So let's talk about let's go down a level, because we're getting into like the realm of action. When we get into the realm of action, that's the planetary level. So Neama is the organizing force behind your psyche that can ultimately lead to actions. But the actions themselves, that's the planetary level, which you can think of as like the ground floor of Lilith, the lowest level of the Qlippa. That's the planetary level. And that's where everything from the higher levels, the generalized idea of the repressed physical, Aishet, to the psychological patterns, Neama, form into real life action. Okay? This is where your beliefs, your shadows, unhealed wounds in your psyche start to shape your actual choices, your actual habits, your body, and your behavior. That's the planetary level, okay? So each of these Qlippa are associated with a planet as the lowest aspect of each of them. So the planet associated with Lilith is the Earth. Shouldn't be really too much of a surprise, as we're talking about the physical realm and the earthly plane and physical desires. She's related to the planet associated with the Lilith Qlippa is Earth. But in a way that's more helpful to understand, it's tied to the 4 elements. Remember the 4 elements? Earth, air, wind, and fire. But it's the shadow. So each of these planets associated with the Qlippa are the shadow versions of the planets. So in this Qlippa, it's the shadow versions of the elements. Okay? So remember, the elements are: air is like intellect, water is emotions and intuition, fire is willpower, earth is like groundedness and stability. But the shadow aspects are when it's I don't want to say, again, they're not necessarily evil. They're just the shadow aspects of it. And so let me give you some examples, okay? Earth typically is about grounding you. It lets you feel safe and stable. The shadow of Earth clings to stuff. Money, people, food. Remember the 4 of Pentacles in the tarot card where there's this king and he has all these pentacles, but he's like holding on. He has a pentacle beneath each his feet, and he's got one that he's like holding on super tight to, and he's got one on his head. It's kind of like that energy. instead of just being about, oh, safe, grounded, stable, secure, it's clinging to things, clinging to stuff, money, people, food, binging, hoarding, over consuming, trying to feel secure by grabbing on and overdoing it. All right. So let's take a look at water. Water is about emotion, intuition, and so it's very much usually related to like relationships and how you connect with others. The shadow of water is escapism and relationships that are like perverted into, I don't mean perverted in like a sexual way. I mean, it could be, but you know what I mean? It's like corrupted, escapism. It could be about escaping into, like I said, a lot of hookups, right? Instead of having real, lasting, quality. And there's nothing wrong with hookups, by the way, if it's safe and consensual and all that. But obviously, you can understand if someone was doing this all the time, it could get dangerous or be unhealthy. So that's what that the shadow of water is about, that unhealthy aspect. And it could also have to do with getting caught up in fantasy or drama, all the shadow aspects of emotion and intuition. Then we have fire, like we talked about fire being willpower, ambition, and creativity. Well, the shadow of fire burns everything down. It's about anger or even overwork, burnout, lashing out, hiding behind your pain through constant motion. We have air. Remember, air is about intellect and clarity. The shadow of air could be things like gossip, seeming like you're spiritual, but you're really doing like spiritual bypassing. You're really hiding from the truth. Lies. And did we do all of them? We did fire, earth, air, and well, yeah, that's the 4 elements. So the idea here is that when these forces are unintegrated, this can lead you to trying to fill up your emptiness with things like shopping, hookups, validation, control, and addiction, emotional spending, numbing yourself with overeating, drugs, chasing wealth, status, trying to feel worthy through looks or whatever. And so that's the problem, the actions that can occur. So you see how you have these various levels, and each one of these levels expresses itself in a different way. But of course, the reason why you need to know this is because different levels require different work. Like if you want to stop emotional spending, it's you can't just be like, oh, you know what? I'm not going to do it anymore. I just choose not to. I mean, sure, if you can, that's great. But usually if it's an actual addiction, you can't just be like, today I just decided I'm not going to do that anymore. You need to face the niyama aspect, the part that's in your psyche that's the root cause of why that's happening. Okay, so let's talk about what happens if Lilith is not integrated. Remember in the last video, I told you 2 warnings about the Qlippot. The first warning was don't fear them. And the second was don't become obsessed with them. Okay, so if you fear them, then they will be repressed. You run away from it. You don't face it. You run away, you don't face it, you repress it, you keep it in the dark. If Lilith is repressed and thus unintegrated, it doesn't matter because she's still going to run your life from the shadows. You might feel ashamed of your body, but also obsessed with sex. You might think that sex is a sin, but then engage in activities that you think are sinful because you've repressed it, and that's going to come out in one way or another. You might chase money to just feel safe or feel a void, or believe that money is evil, and like I said before, live in poverty. You see these different extremes that can occur. Through oppression. It doesn't manifest in everyone the same way, but overall, it's going to control you if you don't deal with it. And you'll often feel really bad about it because if you fear it, you usually think it's shameful or a sin. And it's not. It's neither good nor bad. It's just a certain aspect of you that needs to be dealt with. And if you don't deal with it, it can lead to addiction, obsession, rage, greed, gluttony, unhealthy sexual behavior. And it's all tied to being cut off from real energies that you have within you that need to be expressed. But when Lilith is integrated, well, then everything is completely different, because you don't see the body as something dirty or sinful. You understand that there's nothing wrong with physical pleasure, that sex isn't a sin, that it's part of being human, that food isn't evil, it's nourishment, it's pleasure. Money isn't bad. It's a tool that can give you financial freedom so that you can focus on your purpose, support others, create. And you start to see beauty. And in things like what you once considered to be sinful or shameful, sexuality, you can see even your anger as powerful creative forces rather than something to be afraid of or repressed. Wanting to be attractive is not necessarily bad. It's not bad to want to be attractive. It can be a form of art, expression, self-respect. Making money can lead to freedom. And enjoying pleasure is part of life. You should enjoy life and take pleasure in it. But, and this is the key, don't let Lilith possess you either. Remember, the first was don't fear it, because that leads to repression. The second is don't become obsessed with it, because it leads to psychological possession, which means you give into it. You don't integrate it, you give into it. You give in to indulgence. You lose control. Your cravings take over your life. So the idea here is to find that healthy integrative balance. Like, enjoy pleasure, but don't let it rule your life and replace purpose. Become financially free, but don't let money control your life, so that it's it's an end unto itself rather than a means to an end. So when Lilith is properly integrated, she becomes the force through self-expression, through physical mediums like dance and art and music, healthy sexuality, beauty, financial freedom as a tool for growth, and confidence. There's one more thing that we have to consider, and a very important one, is that Lilith is tied to the middle pillar here. And remember, the middle pillar is the pillar of rebellion. On the tree of death, the middle pillar is the pillar of rebellion. And Lilith is the first rebel. She represents rebellion against the patriarchal and oppressive systems. The systems that tell you that your body is bad, that pleasure is wrong, that desire is dangerous. Lilith says no to all that. She was the first to rebel, depending on the tradition that you're talking about. And the idea is that she lives in everyone, and she is there as the power behind the refusal to being controlled. When you integrate Lilith, you reclaim all these aspects of yourself: body, pleasure, money, and power. And that's the key here, is understanding these ideas so that they don't block you. Because if someone is running from an idea of repression, like sex is evil, your life is going to be screwed up. You're not going to enjoy life as you could have. And it can lead to addiction and a lot of problems. If you become possessed by it and just start having crazy, wild sex in a dangerous way, that's not good either. That's horrible. So you can apply this to anything too. Same thing with money. If you think that money is just this evil, horrible thing that you should go live in poverty, well, maybe you never have the freedom that you could have to create things that you really wanted or explore life in a way that you wanted. But conversely, if you start treating money as an end unto itself, like you just want money for the sake of money and walking all over others to get it, well, then that's also a problem. It's about integrating all these aspects, understanding and not being afraid of them and not letting them take you over either. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is give you some exercises. We're not done because we need to talk about Gamaliel next. But at the end of all of these, so what I'm going to do is at the end of each of these videos on the Qlippothic, or not at the end of the video, but at the end of the explanation of each Qlippothic, I'm going to give you some exercises for integration. Now, a couple things here. First, what I want to mention is that you should be doing two things. One, a symbolic ritual to communicate with your unconscious, and two, actual practical actionable things to integrate it. So symbolic ritual and real world action. You need both. And look, most people only do one or the other. Most people will either be like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to do the ritual and that's just going to take care of everything for me. I don't even need to do any of the, no, nothing's going to change if you just do a damn ritual. It's not going to do anything. The whole point of the ritual is to prime your psyche so that you take action. Now, there's other people who'll be like, ritual, that's stupid, that's dumb, that's woo-woo, mystical nonsense. I'm just going to do the action. And while that can work, it would work much better if you had your unconscious in the background primed and helping you. So you need both. And once again, remember, rituals are nothing woo-woo. It's about a symbolic aspect of communicating with your unconscious mind that bypasses conscious linear thinking so that you can prime your unconscious to be working with you. We do rituals all the time. Birthdays are rituals, New Year's resolutions are rituals, weddings are rituals. We do rituals all day, all the time we're doing rituals. So it's a form of priming your psyche. So I'm going to give you some exercises. Now, as far as the ritual goes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a ritual available to those who are members in a PDF downloadable form. And you can find the link to those in the description. The reason why is because trying to explain a ritual on camera is very awkward and hard to do. In the future, I might do that stuff on camera, but I have to really sit down and think about how I would do that because, like I said, it's very awkward and hard to do on camera. So for now, to begin with, because I want to get things going and started, I will be making the details of that as a download. Okay, but I will be giving you the exercises, the actual actionable exercises here. So remember, what we're doing here is in the Qlippothic of Lilith. It has to do with the rejection of everything related to the physical, the body, money, sex, beauty, indulgence. And so integrating it is about realizing that your body isn't the enemy and pleasure isn't the sin and power isn't wrong. And so here are some ways that you can do this, okay? One, when it comes to finances, is about choosing a clear financial goal that supports your freedom rather than being vanity. So for example, it could be paying off a credit card, building $1,000 in an emergency fund, saving for something that specifically expands your life or business, not just like a fun vacation sort of thing. Then break it down into actual realistic steps and figure out a way to act on that weekly or monthly, like transfer $50 every week or every month, or cut one expense, or invest in art equipment or whatever. Okay. And then of course, just track your progress in a spreadsheet or whatever. And remind yourself, the idea here is to remind yourself that money isn't evil necessarily in itself. I mean, it's unfortunate that we live in a world that works that way, but as it stands in the world and setup that we live in, it can be a tool for independence and power if used properly. Okay? So it's about putting yourself in that mindset, understanding that. It's not about getting rich just for the sake of it. Hell no. But as a means to getting free and fulfilled. All right? So when it comes to your body, think about how you dress. Think about how you show up. If you're, think about how you would dress, how you would show up, how you would express yourself if you weren't afraid of being judged, if no one was going to criticize you. What would you wear? And take a step in that direction this week. You don't even have to do it in public. Just do it at home, just to get started. Wear something that really feels like you, not something that you pick to hide or blend in. Wear the shirt, let it fit however you want. And what I mean by this is, like, if you find it empowering to show skin, then show skin. Dress how the world would consider to be slutty. Who gives a fuck? Or cover up if you want, if you feel like that's more true to you. You know, see, this can be expressed in different ways. Some people might be like, you know what, the world constantly tells me to cover up and be modest, but I really want to dress this way that the world would consider to be slutty, but I want to dress this way. Go for it. Or conversely, someone might be like, you know, people just always want women to dress sexually or something. I don't want to do that. I want to dress more modestly. Not because you feel guilty or because it's sinful, because it's truly you. That's the important part with shadow work. You have to really think about the motives behind the things that you do. What are the motives? And what is true to your true self, and what is something that's just instilled in you by society? So whether it's like showing a lot of skin or showing no skin, whatever, that's just an example. Do it in the way that feels true to yourself, not because you're doing it for others or because society says it needs to be a certain way. And if you start to feel like shameful or judged, examine that. Whose voice is that? Is that something that's actually yours, or was it something that society taught you? Or that your religion taught you? Or that your parents taught you? Or that is constantly shown in movies and advertisements, or whatever? Just examine where that's coming from and discover who you really are. And who you really are is who you should strive to become. So it's about unlearning shame around your body. Your body is yours, and you get to choose how to show up in the world. I mean, reality is our playground. So express yourself. Okay, so when it comes to pleasure, pick something, a pleasurable activity that you can do. Now, of course, make sure that you're in a position that you can afford to do this. If you can't afford to do this, then don't. But if you're in a place where it's in your budget or whatever, pick something to do just purely for pleasure. A meal or a massage or buy something, or just some alone time, whatever. And experience it fully without guilt, without multitasking, feeling like, oh, I need to be doing work while I'm doing this. And then again, the key point is examine it. Did this really satisfy you? And did you choose something because it was really what you wanted or desired? And how did you feel afterward? Did you feel better? Did you feel more connected? Or did you feel shame or guilt? And if you feel shame or guilt, where is that coming from? And why? There's nothing wrong with enjoying life. Again, you don't want to be blowing all your money so that you're in financial hardship, or so that you're neglecting people or whatever, but there's nothing wrong with having some damn pleasure in life. It's kind of half the point of life. So just, again, one of these things that you want to examine. Let's see. Man, I'm looking at the time. This is really a lot longer than I thought it would be. I was going to try and do 3 of the Qlippothic today. I was going to do Lilith, Gamaliel, and Samael, the angel of death. But we'll see if we can just get to Gamaliel today. And if you guys want, next week we'll do the angel of death. Let me know in the comments if you want to see that. The Samael is the angel of death, known as the venom of God, and also a partner to Lilith, Lilith's partner. Anyway, I'm getting off track here. Let's talk about sexuality. So basically what you can do is like track your sexual patterns. What I mean by that is if you're sexually active, pay attention to how you feel before, during, after. Track how you feel about it. Were you excited, nervous, ashamed? Were you present? And what were the motives? Were you feeling connected? Or was it more about control or validation or escape? Did it energize you or did it drain you? If you're not sexually active, ask yourself, what are your turn-ons? You can make a list of your turn-ons. And do you judge yourself for them? Do you associate sex with shame, performance, that's a big one, or even obligation? The idea here is you're not trying to fix anything. You're trying to become aware of your sexual wiring so that you can work with it if needed. And then, of course, there's anger. There's a lot with Lilith because Lilith is the physical world. She's the shadow of the physical world. And that's where everything is sort of combined into this great mixing pot. So there's a lot in, some of these other ones are more straightforward, but there's a lot here. And so anger is another one. Remember, shadow of fire. Don't suppress your anger, but don't let it blow up either. Move it to something useful. You channel your anger into a hard workout or a run or cleaning your apartment or your house, or writing an angry letter about something that makes you mad, or use your frustration to fuel something, set boundaries, maybe launch a project, or channel it into creating music or creating art. And the thing is that anger is only destructive when it's ignored. When you listen to it and channel it, then it can become an energy, a powerful energy, okay? And remember, if you ever have obviously, if you have very big anger problems, this is when you should go see a therapist, all right? So with any of these things, if they are very, this chair is so uncomfortable. I need to get a new chair. I've had this chair for years and I hate it. I don't know why I haven't gotten a new chair. It just hasn't been on my mind. See, I need to have more pleasure in, I was going to say I need to have more pleasure in my ass, but I don't think that quite reflects what I'm trying to say. I need a more comfortable chair. Okay. With that said, let's move over to the next Qlippothic or Qlippa. So we go from Lilith to Gamaliel. Gamaliel, like Lilith, were the queens of the night. Gamaliel is known as the obscene ones. Okay? And so she is the shadow of Yesod. Yesod is the foundation and represents the subconscious realm, the realm of dreams and intuition. Gamaliel is the shadow of all that. So if Lilith is the shadow of the physical, Gamaliel is the shadow of the mind, the world of dreams, symbols, fantasy, sex, illusion, but all twisted. See, like I said, Yesod is tied to dreams and imagination and the moon, and Gamaliel is what happens when that becomes polluted. Basically, like when dreams become nightmares, when visions turn into delusions, where desire crosses the line into obsession and forbidden things consume you from the background. Now, real quick, if you're thinking like, because I had mentioned sex being an aspect of this, if you're like, well, wait, I thought Lilith was about sex. Lilith is about sex, but Gamaliel is, but in a different way. In addition to these other things as well. So we're going to be talking about that. You'll also find in the Tree of Death a lot of sexuality in the Tree of Death. Why? Because sexuality has been repressed for a very long time. So you're going to find a lot of that in, but expressed in different ways, in different aspects. But there's something really cool I want to talk about here, and that's the name Gamaliel itself. I find this name absolutely fascinating, okay? Because, okay, so what is Gamaliel? You know, we can tie a lot of these. So like Lilith is obviously in the Zohar and the alphabet of Ben Sirach. Samael is in the Zohar and a lot of religious literature. With a lot of these beings, they have a very clear origin. Gamaliel is very mysterious. In Hebrew, Gamal means camel. And a camel is often used in Kabbalah to symbolize journeys, a journey. So Gamaliel could point to the journey into the darkness, the descent into the shadow self. Another meaning, when Gamal is used as a verb, so Gamaliel has another meaning, which is God's reward, which could suggest that what's hidden in this dark klipa is treasure, the reward for those who have the courage to face what most run away from. But here's the really interesting part. Gamaliel is also the name of a Gnostic eon. For those who are familiar with my videos on Gnosticism, you know that's no joke. An eon is a powerful being of light. As we continue, we're going to connect more Gnostic ideas with Kabbalistic ideas, okay? But an eon is an extremely powerful being of light, infinitely more powerful than the God of the Bible. It's very close to one of the most powerful forces in existence in Gnostic texts. And Gamaliel is the name of one of the Gnostic eons. But the interesting thing is that the name Gamaliel was found in the Nag Hammadi texts that were discovered in 1945. So as far as I know, in relation to Gnosticism, Gamaliel wasn't understood to be associated with Gnosticism until 1945. Unless there's some obscure text that I'm not aware of in Gnosticism, or and that's possible. If someone knows, let me know in the comments. But as far as I know, Gamaliel as a Gnostic eon only appears in the Nag Hammadi texts, specifically in a book called The Secret Gospel of the Egyptians. Maybe another one as well. But anyway, the interesting thing is that Gamaliel was already used in books talking about the Qlippot before 1945. So that wasn't the original intention, to be associated with a Gnostic eon. But all these ideas kind of merge together into like a really powerful idea as like Gamaliel as a fallen or corrupted eon, because we know that eons can become corrupted if they become trapped in the realm of chaos. So we could look at Gamaliel as a fallen eon, a divine force that was corrupted, and the shadow that holds the divine reward, God's reward, for those fearless enough to journey, Kamal, into the darkness. So very, very cool, very mysterious Qlippot. And I find that, very, very cool, very fascinating. All these ideas come together in a very, very interesting way. Okay. So with that being said, what the hell is Gamaliel about? Like I said, Gamaliel is the polluted unconscious, the shadow of the mind, the place where dreams become hijacked, fantasies spiral out of control, subconscious desires take over. It's so like where Lilith might be lust, Gamaliel would have the hidden lust that you don't even know that is there. It's where fantasies can become addictive. Pornography replaces connection. Hallucinations replace dreams. Apophenia leads to paranoia and delusions. What is apophenia? Apophenia plagues the New Age and spiritual community. So I would say that so many of the spiritual community are possessed by Gamaliel. Rather than being integrated or working with Yesod, they think that they're working with Yesod, but they're really being possessed by Gamaliel, because Gamaliel leads to apophenia, which means seeing patterns where there aren't any. Pattern connection, making connections, is incredibly important for reaching higher consciousness. This is what we call concept networking, but concept networking is not the same as apophenia. Concept networking is finding patterns that are really there, seeing how everything connects in a way that is accurate and veridical and real. Apophenia is seeing patterns where there literally aren't any patterns. So one example of this is like looking up at the clouds and seeing the face of a bunny rabbit in the clouds. Now, if you understand that that cloud is not really a bunny, that's fine. There's no problem with it. If you even want to take it further, you could look at that cloud and be like, you know what? I'm seeing a bunny. I wonder why I'm seeing a bunny. Is this somehow connected to my childhood when I had an experience with bunnies? You could use that as perhaps a way to examine your psyche. What apophenia would be equivalent to is thinking, that's a literal fucking bunny. Of course it's not. And this is an extreme example, but apophenia going out of control, someone would, if you see, oh, that's a bunny, and you recognize that's apophenia, because it's not really a bunny, it's not actually, but someone with apophenia that's out of control sees patterns that aren't there and thinks that they are real. And this has happened so much in the New Age and spiritual community, where it's just an overdrive. They make all these connections that have no basis in actual reality. Okay, so this is a very important one. Gamaliel is very important, especially dealing with spiritual and mystical individuals, which a lot of people will probably be attracted to this video. And that's fine. That's great. That's good. But we all have the things that we need to deal with. Like people who are atheist materialists are very disconnected from their intuition. They likely don't have apophenia. They're so disconnected that they don't even see the connections that are there. We all have our challenges. And so people who tend to be, this is not true across the board, I'm generalizing, but people who tend to be, involved in spiritual and mystical communities are affected by Gamaliel. Okay. And so in addition to that, there's also, like I said, sexuality, which, remember, Lilith is associated with sexuality, but Lilith represents the sex that you want. Gamaliel is the sex that you don't even know you want, but is in your unconscious. The parts that are so taboo and buried that they only emerge in your dreams or your kinks. It's the idea of, like, oh, I could never be gay. I'm not attracted to men. I hate gay people. Gay people are horrible. I think, that it's a sin. But really, that person saying that really wants to go fuck a guy. Like that's what we're talking about. But he might not even know that. He's buried it so deep and has projected so much, he might not even know that that's there. So that's just one example. I'm trying to show you like the difference between like Lilith and Gamaliel, where Lilith is more physical, Gamaliel is more mental, but it leads to physical. So they're definitely related, right? There's crossover. But all in all, Gamaliel is obsession, fantasy addiction, escapism, forbidden desires, illusions and delusions mistaken for insight. Okay, so let's talk about the different levels. We're going to break it down into 3 levels. Now, I want to say again, there are actually 4 levels, but I'm omitting one of the levels because it would just make things way too complicated and way too long. And I feel like, there's probably an overabundance of information, even with the levels that we're talking about here. But the reason why I didn't even have to talk about the levels, but I want to put the levels in there so you guys can really get a clear understanding of how this stuff is structured. You don't need to memorize all this stuff, like I said, but it's there if you want to know it. And it's important to see how this structure works. Okay, so we're going to break down Gamaliel, just like what we did with Lilith. Remember, the Qlippa itself is like a building. Gamaliel is the realm, the world, the building. The top floor is the Archon, which is the overarching structure and pattern that holds it together. The middle floor is the Archdemon, which is the psychological archetype. And then the ground floor is the planetary influence, where it shows up as actions and behavior in your real life. Okay? So let's talk about the Archon of Gamaliel. The Archon of Gamaliel is Hecate. Yes, that Hecate. Believe it or not, in the Gnostic text called Pistis Sophia, Hecate is described as an Archon. And she's a ruler of hidden realms, and very appropriate to be assigned the Archon of Gamaliel. Hecate is the goddess of night, crossroads, witchcraft, necromancy, and the underworld. She guards the threshold between worlds. She's known as the triple goddess. And what's kind of cool about this is, if you notice, Hecate is the triple goddess. And so we can think of one of her faces looking down here, one of her faces looking up here, and one of her faces looking up here as well. Because we haven't talked about these energies, but these energies go down into Gamaliel, which then leads to the physical world of action. So it's very appropriate to have Hecate as the triple goddess in this intersection or crossroads between these three paths or tunnels. And yeah, so anyway, very, very cool stuff. Let's see. She is the gatekeeper and the one who is sort of the ruler of the dream world. Okay? So now we have Gamaliel. The Archon of Gamaliel is Hecate. Now we're going down a level to the Archdemon. And remember, the Archdemon is the archetype that ultimately is the force behind the organizing structure of your psyche. So here's where things get a little confusing, but don't worry, it's not that confusing. And here's why. Because the Archdemon of Gamaliel is Lilith. So here's the thing. Yes, Lilith is a Qlippa, but she's also the Archdemon of Gamaliel. So you see how, think of it kind of like this. I'm just spitballing here. But think of someone who is the CEO of a company, but then has a second job at a different company where they're the manager. Well, they're both, depending on the CEO at one company or the manager of the other. Now, this isn't entirely accurate, because Lilith would be more like the entire building of, or like the company itself. But then at another company, she might be the manager. So you could think of Lilith as being an entire world or realm or company herself in her form as a Qlippa, but also as the manager level of Gamaliel. All right, does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. Let me know in the comments if that's clear. So Lilith is the archdemon of Gamaliel, specifically in her aspect of the harlot and the seductress, specifically the seductress of the unconscious, because Lilith is known as we've seen, the queen of the night, and she's also known as a succubus, the one who steals men's seed while they're sleeping and dreaming. She's also associated with the moon, as is Hecate, as is Gamaliel. And so Lilith has a very powerful role as the archdemon of Gamaliel. And according to legend, Lilith uses the stolen seed to give birth to thousands of demonic children. Sometimes they're called Lilithu, which psychologically represents the dark, compulsive, unconscious activity, sexuality, delusions in the mind. So as a Qlippa, she's the shadow of the realm of the physical. And Gamaliel, she's the archdemon ruler of fantasy, the taboo, the hidden, the things that seduce you from the background of your mind. Lilith isn't just a kink, let's say. She's a kink that scares you. Something that shames you. The fetish that you don't want to admit that you have, or might not even be aware that you have, but it won't go away because it's there. And so these are these desires leak into our behavior without conscious choice. They're the fantasies that control you. Okay? So we have Gamaliel. The Archon of Gamaliel is Hecate. The archdemon of Gamaliel is Lilith. And at the very bottom floor is the Planetary Association. The Planetary Association here is the shadow of the moon, or the dark side of the moon. So the planet associated with Yesod is the moon. The planet associated with Gamaliel is the dark side of the moon, or alternatively, something known in astrology as Black Moon Lilith. In astrology, there's something actually called Black Moon Lilith, which is very appropriate. So we could think of that, like the shadow of the moon, the dark side of the moon, Black Moon Lilith. And so you can see all the lunar activity going on here. We have Hecate, a lunar goddess. We have Lilith associated with the moon. We have the dark side of the moon, Black Moon Lilith. And so remember, the planetary aspect or level represents behavior and actions. And so this is where the thought patterns presented by Lilith become actions and behavior. If this is unintegrated, what this can do is lead to intense sexual frustration and explosive outbursts. I mean, this is sort of like what was the cause of the witch burnings. People were frustrated. They didn't, because but they condemned what they wanted as sin, and then they just saw women as evil because they reminded them of their own. It's like the Hunchback of Notre Dame. I've never seen that movie, by the way, because I wasn't allowed to watch it. So hopefully that comparison is accurate. But I think there's like a priest that wants to sleep with the main character, and he's all lusty, but he is an asshole because of it. I don't know. I've never seen it. I just have seen little clips here and there. It might be an accurate comparison. Apologies if it isn't. But anyway, it's like that. Okay. It can become but it's not just sexual here as well. It's about obsession with fantasies. It can be sexual fantasy obsession, but it can be just fantasies in general. Escapism. Again, this can cause addictions, delusional beliefs, confusing fantasy with reality, not being able to tell what's true and what's not true. It can lead to emotionally unsafe or risky sexual behavior, mood swings, literal madness. You can, if this isn't integrated, being ruled by impulse. The moon is sometimes associated with madness. Lunacy comes from the word lunar. And this is just what happens when you repress all these things and they come out chaotically, or they're not dealt with. And you start believing the bunnies in the clouds are actual bunnies. Not literally, but you know what I mean, in terms of, let's say, like that the earth is flat, or that the moon is hollow or whatever. Okay? So when Gamaliel is repressed, you deny your fantasies. You deny your taboo desires. You pretend that they're not there or condemn them as evil. But as always, repression doesn't delete anything. It just pushes it into the unconscious where it gets stronger. Okay? So repression looks like believing you're above. You're too holy. You're too spiritual for sexual desire or fantasy. Or, I mean, it can take so many different forms. This is where one might think, oh, yes, I like sex, but only pure, but really you have this like, quote unquote, dirty, but not actual dirty kink or whatever. But no, I'm too spiritual or holy for that. It can also manifest as judging others for being perverse while you secretly have the desire yourself, like I had mentioned earlier, like, oh, I'm not gay. Look how much I hate gay people. Those gay people are perverted. I'd never do that. Meanwhile, 10 years down the road, it's a pastor that gets fired for screwing someone on the altar or something. Anyway, you get what I mean. So a lot of it is around, feeling shame for things that you might not even be able to explain. It can relate to suppressing your imagination, your creativity, because there's a lot of creativity here in the name of purity or whatever. Projection, feeling disgusted by things that remind you of that. And it cuts you off from your power, your creativity, your sensuality, your ability to use your imagination and play. So that's what happens when it's not integrated. Now, on the other hand, remember, you don't want to run from it, but you don't want to be obsessed with it. If Gamaliel is not integrated, but rather fully indulged, integration doesn't mean indulging it. It means finding a way to deal with it. I think that's what a lot of people misunderstand about integration. Integration does not mean you just, give into it. It means you find a way to deal with it, to work with it. So if Gamaliel is not integrated, but rather possessed, it possesses you, which is what a lot of people in the spiritual community happens to them, even though they don't know it. Now your fantasies control you. And so this can relate to, like I said, not being able to tell fact from fiction, truth from reality, in terms of like behavior related to sexuality. It can be like addiction to porn or escaping into like fantasy scenarios at the expense of real world relationships, replacing intimacy with obsessive kinks, like kinks that could get out of control so that, I don't know, maybe you start objectifying people, things like that. It's about, you're totally overrun by all these fantasies, delusions. You could believe that these delusions that you're having are divine revelations or communications from aliens. And hey, I'm not against channeling. They're channeling. There might be something to that, but you don't want to believe that every freaking feeling or thought in your head you get is a message from God or the Galactic Federation. So confusing dreams for truth, rather than as, like taking it literally, taking a dream literally rather than exploring its symbolic connections. Sometimes dreams can be more on the literal side, but you get what I mean. When you're just overrun and consumed, this is what happens. Instead of you ignoring it, you let them possess you. Instead of denying them, you become obsessed with it and you lose yourself in it. Because it's not you anymore. You are Gamaliel when you're possessed by it. And that's the thing. You don't want to identify with any of these archetypes, even the good ones. You are not any one of these. You're all of them. Anytime you identify with any one of them, you're going to have problems. You're going to be possessed by it. It's going to lead to possession. It's going to lead to ego inflation. But if you integrate Gamaliel successfully, then it's great. You stop fearing your fantasies. Some people are. but you start working with them consciously. You can realize that there's a difference between acting out compulsively and exploring something internally and intentionally. You begin to realize that taboo doesn't mean evil. Now, of course, there's stuff out there that is bad, but I'm talking in a more generalized way. I'll talk about that in a moment. But for now, what I'm talking about is if it can be explored safely and consensually and honestly, then it can be incredibly healing, even if society says it's taboo or wrong. But if it's actually not, and you can do it consensually, honestly, safely, then it can be very, very healing. So for example, using kink or role play or BDSM with a partner in a safe, consensual place to explore hidden aspects of yourself. Practicing dream work, sex magic, lunar rituals to engage the unconscious, not being afraid of rituals, thinking that, rituals are evil or rituals are woo-woo, rather realizing they're not evil or woo-woo, they're powerful forms of connecting to the unconscious, creating erotic poetry, art, stories from those deep aspects of your psyche. It's just about embracing your fantasy world without being ruled by it. I'm currently reading The Never-Ending Story because Susan got that for me as a gift, by the way, which is awesome. I love The Never-Ending Story. It is my favorite movie of all time. In the book, every time Bastian makes a wish, he loses memory of the real world. And so the story, the moral of the story there is fantasy is a good thing, but don't become so lost in fantasy at the expense of the real world. Anyway, it's just about embracing these things, integrating them. Remember, integrating doesn't mean indulging in everything, but choosing what to explore and why in a safe, consensual way. So, put simply, repression is when you tell yourself, this is not in me, but it actually is and leaks out chaotically. And possession is when you basically say, oh, this is me, and you give into it. Integration is neither of these. It says, this is part of me, and I choose how to work with it. It is a part of me. It is not me, and I will let it control me. Neither will I run from it or fear it. It is a part of me, and I choose how to work with it. Okay? So, integrated, Gamaliel, is very powerful. Connects to shadow and art and creativity, fantasy in a positive way. And so Gamaliel isn't about something like a force that wants to destroy you. It wants you to stop pretending that you don't have a dark side. Because you do. When you face it, you become whole. That's why Carl Jung said, you do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. So let's talk a little bit, let me see here, about some integration exercise. Let me check my notes. Okay. So some integration exercises, let's see. What we want to do here is explore what's hidden in you in a conscious and safe way. And I always want to give this sort of warning here, especially when it has to do with, because look, we're dealing with a lot of energy that isn't necessarily bad, but can be bad if used incorrectly. Again, like gasoline, not bad in itself, can power your car, but if you use it wrong, you can blow yourself up. So when I'm warning you here, it's not like I'm saying be afraid of it. I'm just saying, hey, don't light a match next to it. Like, don't light a match next to the gasoline. right? Like, so I'm just, anyway, what I mean by this is, let me just give you what I mean. A lot of us feel shame over desires that are actually totally fine. Including kinks or fetishes. They aren't wrong. They're human. But when we repress them, they build and they start to control us. So we want to bring those parts into the light so we can explore them safely and consciously. But this is really important, though. Not everything that we repress is harmless. Some people carry very dangerous or harmful desires, things rooted in trauma that could hurt others or yourself if acted on. So I'm just saying, if that is the case, if you have something, if you find something in your shadow that's like, oh shit, this isn't good. Don't try to deal with it alone. This is when you need to go talk to a therapist and a mental health professional. And I want to really stress that and emphasize it, is that we're talking about a lot of ways to healthily explore the shadow and integrate the shadow, and that's all great. But always remember, if you find something in there that you're like, oh shit, you need to see a therapist or a mental health professional, and there's nothing shameful about that. Because integration doesn't mean acting on everything. It means dealing with it, and a therapist is a great way to deal with it. So ultimately, it's about understanding what's there and making ethical, safe, consensual choices about it. All right. I think that's the main thing, is whatever you're doing, always make sure that it's ethical, safe, and consensual. And if you feel like that's a problem, then see a mental health professional or a therapist. Really, I'd recommend everyone, having a therapist for any of this stuff. It'd be great. Therapy is great for any of this. It's just helpful. A therapist can help you understand how to deal with any of these things. Even more relatively ones that seem more trivial, but a therapist will be able to help you. Anyway, what we're going to do here, like I said, is take a look at some exercises. And one way, because this is sort of the realm of dreams and intuition, but gone out of control, is start recording your dreams every morning. Even if you can just remember only parts of them. And look for parts that you feel like could be associated with Gamaliel. Maybe some that involve sex or fear or fantasy or shame. And figure out what part of you is trying to get through. What could that symbolize in your waking life? Is it something that you avoid, or does it indicate a desire that you don't want to admit or aren't even aware of? It's about bringing the unconscious into the unconscious. So starting a dark journal, a journal of Gamaliel or Hecate or Lilith or the dark side of the moon. You could play with a lot of fun imagery there. But yeah, that's a good one. You could express yourself through erotic art or writing. Think about if you do discover a repressed desire that you have, you can express it symbolically. A poem, a painting, a music, a short story. Gamaliel, the energy there, it needs a place to be expressed, or at least dealt with in some way. It doesn't necessarily have to be expressed in the way that it exists. You can reroute the energy, but you have to do something with it. And so art is a great way to do that. Another thing you can do is look at where you escape, when and where you escape into fantasy. And think about that if it's really helping you. And what I mean by that is things like porn or fantasies about other people, perhaps, social media thirst traps, erotic content that you feel shame over, or whatever. Just track all of these sort of addictive sort of behaviors and consider the root cause of this. The goal is to spot when you're using fantasy to disconnect versus when you use it to express or explore. You see the difference? So it's about finding the times that you are engaging in fantasy and asking and track, am I doing this in a healthy way or an unhealthy way? Am I using this fantasy to disconnect or am I using it to express? And then here's a great one, is you can do a fantasy detox, which means if you're addicted to something like porn or escapism or conspiracy theories or whatever, any of the things that we talked about, take a 7-day break, not as a punishment, but to reset your nervous system. And during that time, use one of the things that we already talked about, dream journaling, art, expression, to redirect that energy into creative channels. See, that's the important part. See, if you're going to take a 7-day detox, right? Like let's say it's porn or something. Then, I hope YouTube doesn't flag this video for me saying that. Anyway, the goal isn't to just be like, oh, I'm not going to do it. Yeah, don't do it, but also find a way to direct that energy, because that energy has to go somewhere. And either it's going to make you fail, or it's going to come out as an angry outburst, or as an addiction to something else, or whatever. So you need to find a way to deal with it. So, if you start getting a certain urge, work out, or work on a song, or go running, or do something creative, whatever. And again, it doesn't just have to be, I mentioned it could be about like conspiracy theories or whatever you are addicted to that is causing you that escapism in a negative way. And then really examine it too and think about, what are you trying to avoid? What are you really hungry for? And then a great thing to do is to think about, the different fantasies or desires that you might have. One that feels like is safe, and experiment with it consciously. And what this could mean is having a conversation with a partner about a kink, or trying a role play scenario that turns you on. Again, always safely and consensually and ethically. But if you're doing those things, then think about how you could express that. Engaging in BDSM, if that's your thing, or whatever it is. And the important thing is set clear boundaries, keep it grounded, and make sure that you're doing it in a healthy way. But if you do all of those things, then you can do it in a way where you are finding a way, ultimately at the end of the day, to recognize that energy that is there and deal with it. That's the most important thing. So if you ever look into like depth psychology or Jungian psychology, they always talk about how an important thing to do is, if there's an aspect of your psyche that's causing problems, is to name it, project it visually, and have a conversation with it and accept it. And that's literally what we're doing here. That's why, some people might be like, why Lilith? Why Gamaliel? Why Hecate? Why can't I just? Because what you're doing is that when you, and like I said, this is discussed in Jungian psychology, what you're doing here is you free up that energy in a way that can be used in a useful way. When you acknowledge it, name it, project it, dialogue with it, and that's enough. You can have conversations. When I mean by conversations, I don't mean like, oh, it's going to materialize in front of you, but it's like what Carl Jung called active imagination, where you go into an imaginative scenario in your mind and have an imagined conversation with these different beings, and ask it what it wants. Ask it if it's trying to protect something, etc. There's a lot of things you can do when you go into active imagination. And that's essentially what this is. Working with angels and demons and all that was active imagination before people even knew what that was, or that was a thing in psychology. But anyway, Oof, man, that was long. We talked about Lilith and Gamaliel. A good thing I didn't put Samael in here as well. What I want to know from you guys is if you're enjoying this, if you want more videos on this, because if you do, tell me in the comments. And then next week we will explore Samael, which is the angel of death, the venom of God, and the consort of Lilith. If we have time, we'll do the other Qlippa as well, known as Arab Zarak, which is a very interesting one. But anyway, let me know in the comments if there's stuff that needs to be elaborated on, or if it's clear, and if you want to continue with this series on the Qlippot. As always, remember, I will be making available free for members a PDF download with a summary and cheat sheet of everything that we talked about today, as well as the ritual aspect to work with as well. And when you become a member, it helps out a lot. You get access to our members only videos. We're having a members only video right after this called "Can You Really Know God, or Is It Forever Out of Reach?" And then make sure you check out my books. I recommend this one if you like the sort of things we talk about in terms of psychology for a higher consciousness. And follow me on Spotify. I appreciate you guys so much. Big shout out to everyone who supports, especially, let's see, Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Angela, DB, Dallas, Nusalina, Celsus, Chris Magistus, Eric, they call me Trinity, Solange, and everyone else. Thank you very much.